Hello everybody. Welcome to Talk, the show where we explore how organizations and individuals are creating positive change in India and the world at large. I'm your host Adarsh, and today I am delighted to have Professor Bhagwan Chowdhry with me. He's a professor of finance at Indian School of Business and research professor at UCLA Anderson, where he has held an appointment since 1988. He's the executive director of Digital Identity Research Initiative, DIRI, and faculty director at IVenture, ISB. Professor Chaudhry has taught at University of Chicago, University of Illinois at Chicago, and Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. He received his PhD from Booth School of Business, University of Chicago, and has an MBA in finance from University of Iowa. A BTech. He also holds a BTech in mechanical engineering from Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. His research interests, on which he has published several papers in finance and economics journals, are in international finance, corporate finance, impact investment, and fintech. He also organizes and taught executive education programs in Los Angeles, Singapore, Hong Kong, Mumbai, and Hyderabad, and is also an advisor to several fintech startups. Professor Chaudhry proposed financial access at birth program in which every child born in the world is given an initial deposit of $100 in an online bank account to guarantee that everyone in this world will have access to financial services in a few decades. With that wonderful thought, Professor, welcome to Talks.
Thank you.
So without further ado, let's jump right into the conversation. So Professor, your model of social impact investing is a bit different from conventional understanding of impact investing. For the benefit of our viewers and also to help setting the right context, it would help if you could briefly explain your rendition of social impact investing and what's your model about.
Okay, happy to do it. So, whenever we think of impact investing, we think about investments in a project or an idea that has some social significance. We call it the social good. Now, the one idea is that, okay, we do something that produces social good, but it is also good in terms of financial return. So it's good in everything. And people think of impact investing as those projects which are good for the company and also good for society. Some projects are like that, but most are not. In most cases, social impact comes at some trade-off, some costs in terms of financial returns. That's what the key is. And I think we need to understand how to mobilize capital and talent so that these social impact projects can be taken when there is a little bit of tension between financial and social returns. So that requires a bit of work.
Great. So, Professor, just taking the cue from your tussle between the financial imperative or the impact and the impact imperative, do you see these preferences changing anywhere in the post-COVID world of today, where we see so many people resigning, there is mass resignations happening, people have started valuing life, but do you also see people valuing social good over their profits?
Okay, there is a change, and I think it's a very distinct change, especially if you talk to young people, young, educated people. I find that change happening. But you have to remember, they are not the majority of world population. The majority of the world population is still poor, okay? And for them, survival is still the key. So let's not get carried away and say everybody wants to do social good, so there's really no tension. Yes, it is changing, and there is more capital coming in terms of philanthropic money and other type of social capital, if you will, social impact capital, but I think it's still limited. And we have to kind of take cognizance of that fact that that will always be limited. The self-interest and the survival instinct and the need of the society is still going to be the predominant factor.
Right, right. I think that's very well said, very well put, Professor Rado. And just taking the conversation forward with regards to your paper, which is widely celebrated paper, I must insist, for the benefit of our audience, the issue of uniformization of metrics for measuring impact happens to be at the center of the whole paper. In fact, it's one of the most persistent stumbling blocks in your model. Given that you have been working on this concept for quite some time now, have you come across any real world example or system of matrix that bolster your confidence about the same or in your model?
So let's back up a little bit and let me explain what is needed. You see, let's forget about social impact. Let's just think about how to produce cars, okay? So forget about social impact. Now, nobody says that if you have money, you should be the one producing cars and you should be the one selling cars and you should be the one distributing cars, right? No. What we want is we want the best person for that job, the right person who can market it, the right person who can build it, the right person who can. So we delegate that authority. And the money may come from a person who doesn't care about cars, but he cares about financial returns. But in the modern firm, we are still able to put it together. How? By creating right incentives. So what do? We say, okay, I'm going to build a car factory and I'm going to hire managers, I'm going to hire engineers, and I'm going to incentivize them to produce the best car. They need not be the shareholders, right? But I'm creating incentives in terms of salaries and benefits. So I think the key here is incentives. What incentives can we create? Now let's take the CEO. What incentives can I give to the CEO to produce the best car, but also generate and be able to sell cars at a reasonable price? Okay, because the CEO may not care what shareholders care. So what do? We say, okay, we are going to create compensation package that creates this incentive. So we give stocks to the CEO. We give stock options so that even though I'm the CEO, I'm thinking a little bit like the shareholders. Okay. We need to take this idea and now apply it to impact investing. Impact will not happen on its own if you just leave it, because the best CEO you can hire may not be a person who cares about that social cause. So should I just say, oh, let me fire this guy, let me get a guy who actually cares about the social cause? Well, if you can get somebody, good, but then I'm limiting my choice only to those people who also care about the social cause. And that's going to cost in terms of efficiency. Why not instead get the best possible CEO and make sure his or her compensation is higher if the social impact is achieved? So I need to create a way of measuring social impact. That's what you meant by metrics. So we need to create metrics that are able to measure the social impact in an effective way so that I can create incentives, not only for the management, but also for some investors who are the type of investors you talked about, those who care about social impact. But at the same time, that's not going to be enough, as I said, because that money is limited. Philanthropic money is limited. I also want to be able to attract other investors. Okay, so you need to make sure that their incentives are aligned too. And that's what our model tries to do. How do you set this up so that the appropriate incentives are created? So now let me answer your question about the metrics. Yes, metrics are important, but here's the key. People get lost in saying the metrics have to be detailed. They have to be exact. They have to measure every little thing correctly. And I think that is completely wrong. Because if you put the onus on the metrics to be very precise, there will be abuse. People will find ways around it. The more complicated it is, the more difficult it is to write contracts based on such metrics. So look at stock options or stocks. They're very simple. They're based on the stock price, just one thing, right?
Yes.
Take other performance bonus. This could be based on the profits you make. Very simple. So we need to create similar metrics that are simple, easy to measure, and those that cannot be manipulated by those who are actually going to have an influence on those metrics. And that's what the key is. So we should not worry about saying that it has to be really right. We have to make sure that the metric is highly correlated, what I'm trying to measure, but it's not perfect correlation. Perfection is the enemy of getting things done. And if you want to get things done, choose a simple metric, and then the contracts will be easy and they will be largely non-manipulable. So it's a long answer to your question, but that's what the model tries to do.
I think apart from the finance, I think this would also apply to a lot of youngsters as well. So I think your advice goes well with that as well. And in your lectures, you've already emphasized that how you always talk about impact, and it's disassociation or dehyphenation from the word social and having impact as it, so that CEOs can work on impact and whether they are interested in impact or not. So that's a very good point. And just taking
I
that
think sometimes we do a disservice. So let me say this one point. Sometimes when we create this expectation that what you're creating will have social impact and it will have good financial returns, then you're shutting off all kinds of other projects which should be taken, and people should understand the financial returns are not going to be high. Okay. So what you need is you need a little help. Okay. So the other extreme is, oh, let's forget about these regular investors, go only to social investor, which is also wrong because the social capital is limited. We have to use it judiciously. So I should be able to take 1 rupee or $1 of social capital and get 5 more rupees and $5 of regular capital to be able to leverage that. And I think that's what the key is in this literature.
So, Professor, talking about judicious use of philanthropic money, I mean, just I have figures in front of me that philanthropic investments stood at $3.6 billion in 2022 as per one estimate. And this was in fact larger than the CSR spending in the same year, which stood at $3.3 billion. So, what would be your suggestions to these philanthropic organizations which are springing every day now, backed by the philanthropic families and HNIs? How should they be utilizing the money for social good and welfare? Given that your model says that you should use it judiciously and in fraction, and it is the commercial investment that should flow in to back up the projects.
So you're saying 3.6 billion, that sounds like a big amount to you, but it is a trickle. It is a trickle compared to commercial capital that's available. So you seem to think that there's a lot of it. I think there's not enough. I think there's very little. So what I need to do is I need to take each dollar of philanthropic capital and be able to multiply it by at least 10. Then I'm in business, because instead of doing one project, I can do 11 projects, 1 plus 10. That's what the goal is. I think that's where we need to go.
Right, right. I think that's very well said, Professor. So moving a bit towards SDGs, and given the renewed thirst towards achieving SDGs post-COVID, many steps are being taken to prioritize social good, and even among business and investors, which involves our whole conversation regarding around impact investing. Like for instance, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change recently unveiled proposed regulation for green credit program. Finance minister just talked about allocating 35,000 crores to achieving green energy transitions and net zero emissions. Indian Stock Exchange, or India Social Stock Exchange, is anyway inching closer to its first listing, and SEBI is also enhancing its BRSR reporting. So, according to you, what do you make of these developments? Are these developments in the positive directions? Because they also take the social investing or impact investing towards the social projects forward. Or and also additional question to that, is this happening at good enough rate? Because the climate crisis is looming at large. We are seeing climate catastrophe every day nowadays. So, what do you make of these developments, Professor?
Okay. So I think these developments are all positive, but I want to have a word of caution. I do not like the idea of equating sustainability with climate change. Climate change is a tiny part of this whole thing. Sustainability is an idea that we should embrace even if there was no climate change, right? Because sustainability is the idea which says conserve resources, don't use more than what you need, leave the earth better than what you found. I think those ideas are very strong ideas. And because it gets mixed up, sometimes we lose the idea because we say, oh, I don't believe in climate change. Maybe we'll find a technological solution for climate change. But that doesn't take away a goal to create sustainable things. So I like the word sustainable. I don't like the word climate change. Climate change is one part of it. Okay. So having said this, even here, I would like us to create very simple classification. Okay. So I'll say create 3 buckets. First bucket is it's a low hanging fruit. It's good for sustainability, but it is also good economically. So I call that the no-brainer. What we need to do is we need to go and look at all projects and products which fit into that category because this requires no thinking, right? Take LED bulbs, requires no thinking. It's good for the environment. It is also cheaper, right? So why would you not do it even if you don't believe in sustainability? So first we should get all those things and get people to commit to those. The second category is that it's not economically viable at the current scale. But if I give it scale, it will become a no-brainer. So what you need in that case is you need to develop the whole ecosystem so that you can achieve that scale. This is where governments can help. This is where philanthropic organizations can help. In other words, I alone, as a company, don't have enough incentives to do it because it's too small. But if enough people do it, it makes sense. So let me give you an example. What happened with solar panels? Solar energy was not a viable option 20 years ago because the solar panels were too expensive. China came and basically cut that cost down by 90%. So the solar panels became extremely, because they were building it at scale and they brought innovation. And now the solar energy has become totally viable. It has become, in fact, in the first category, that is cheaper than other forms of electricity. And the last category, which is the hardest, is no matter how much scale I have, I still have to make a trade-off. We need to tell people exactly how that's going to happen, because then I will choose that product because I think it is important. Because even though it hurts my pocket a little bit, I think it's good, and that's why I'm doing it. So I like to put these things in 3 categories. I don't like detailed classifications. I wish somebody would take this and take every product, every project that's out there and put it in, green, yellow, and red, so that we know what we are dealing with.
Professor, in which category would you put ESG?
Look, ESG again is confusing because there are 3 things that we are stapled together. They don't go together. What's governance got to do with sustainability? What's that got to do with environment? I hate the word ESG. I think we just staple things together like BRICS countries. Just because, I don't know, Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley put these things together doesn't mean there was any sense in putting them. Nobody talks about BRICS anymore. Have you noticed? 20 years ago, it was all bricks, all bricks. Now we are not talking about bricks anymore. So I don't like stapling of ideas. I like to think about ideas from scratch.
Great. That's a great thought to ponder upon for a lot of people. But since you mentioned sustainability and you represent institution like ISB, which provide research support and thought leadership to the larger domain. So given that currently there is no credible course in the sector which methodologically covers such issues, whether it's sustainability, because there may be certifications, but there is no course. So what do you think would should be the role of institutions like ISB and especially the academia to take these conversations or the discourse that you're mentioning forward and to have them methodologically planned?
So we have begun already. We have started to introduce classes on climate and sustainability. But when you say course, I think you mean like a dedicated 1 year program or something like that. I think that's a mistake. I don't think we should go that way because this is an idea that should be embraced and woven into everything else we do. So I don't think people should be saying, hey, I'm going to the School of Sustainability. They should be saying, I'm going to the School of Business or School of Engineering. And the engineering and business people should incorporate the idea of sustainability. So in the beginning, it looks like a specialization. I'm working in climate change. No, this is what used to happen when I was in the United States studying as a graduate student. International finance was like a specialized course. Over time, we don't call international finance specialized anymore. Everything is international. How can you not have international finance? So I think that's what's going to happen to sustainability. Sustainability would come in and will seep into our bodies, and we'll have to think about this thing as one whole.
That's a great thought. I think that's what you say that sustainability should be in all the courses rather than having a specialized course for sustainability itself. I think that's a great thought. But slightly digressing from the topic that we have today, how can we not talk about your Fab initiative, which sounds fabulous? So you are among the strong proponents of financial access at birth, what is more popularly known as Fab model. Therein, you propose 3-point plan involving $100 saving amount for all newly born infants, universal ID, and mobile and electronic banking. So over the years, India and both world at large has gone through monumental changes. We have UPI, which has brought banking at our fingertips. We have Aadhaar, which I think has a coverage of 92.7%. So how do you rate? I don't know whether Government of India followed your instructions or not, but how would you rate this India's progress on Fab? Because they did take 2 out of 3.
So when I proposed Fab with my other people who joined me in this campaign, digital identity was just beginning. Nandan Nilekani was just starting to think about it. And as you said, I thought about it from the point of view of incentives. So the reason I stapled these things together after giving you a big lecture about not stapling these things together, there was a method to that madness. $100 to me was an incentive that would make people want to get the digital identity, that would make people want to come to the bank and say, yes, I want an identity. It was an incentive. We had also imagined this not to be necessarily done by the government. We wanted to do it in such a way that it was incentive compatible for banks also to provide that service. So banks usually shun, they don't want to work with the poor accounts, right? There are no incentives for them. But if you give them 1 million accounts, each with $100, 5,000, 7,000, at that time 5,000 rupees, now 8,000 rupees, now you're talking money. And the fees I can earn on that is enough to sustain that. So Fab was built in with these incentive strings. Well, so we got digital identity. Kudos to Nandan Nilekani. My worry was, how will we make sure that people actually get this digital identity? Now in India, we got it, but we got it by stealth. We didn't do it by incentives, right? What we did was we created a little bit of coercion, not explicit coercion. What we did was we said, I think you need Aadhaar for everything. So there was this huge confusion in people's mind. Do I need Aadhaar for everything? And de facto, it has become required. I go to the airport and they take this piece of paper and treat this as an ID. Nanda never thought of this as an ID. Right? That piece of paper that anybody can make a copy of, somehow everybody's taking it as an ID. I go to my hotel and they say, show me your Aadhaar card. Again, they're treating it like an ID. So it kind of, there was this coercion that happened. Then came demonetization, another big push, not necessarily related to this idea. And lastly, unfortunately, the pandemic hit, right? So all these things helped. Now, UPI looks like a big success, and Aadhaar looks like a big success. You said, more than close to 1.3 billion accounts. But I don't think we can declare victory yet. In other words, Aadhaar, UPI has included people like you, me, who were already included. Ask yourself, is your maid using UPI or not? Some of them are, most of them are not. Ask yourself if your older brother or your grandfather feeling comfortable using electronic money or not. They are not. So I don't think we are there yet. I don't think it's still work to be done. In fact, I wrote a book with a colleague of mine, Anas Ahmed, which is going to be released next month, where we talk exactly about that. How do we make this fintech for billions? And our thought is that yes, the technology and the infrastructure is there, but that's like laying of all the highways. The roads from the highways to the shop, highway to the store are still not there. So we need three things. I'm going to say this and then people can read my book. Technology has to be simple. It is simple, stupid. If it's not simple, people are not going to embrace it. Secondly, it has to be human. People are afraid of technology because their money is involved, right? So when I send something with a push of a button, I am scared that the money actually went or not, or was more money taken out of my account or not. We need to create that trust. So I think we need to create a little human element where somebody's telling me it's okay. Somebody's holding my hand and teaching me about it. And the last thing we need is ubiquity. It has to be ubiquitous. It should be available everywhere. You can't say, here's a plan, but only some people are using it, other people are not. Everybody has to use it so that anywhere I go, it's easy. That's what cash does. I never worry about people not accepting cash. My doodh wala accepts cash, my sabzi wala accepts, my auto person, my maid accepts cash. Everybody accepts cash. But try using UPI with everyone. It's not there yet. So I think we have made a lot of progress, and this digital public infrastructure that we have created is very good, but much more needs to be done.
So we are to acknowledge, but it's, and I think I'm looking forward to read your book, Professor, and I think so is our audience would be, and we are waiting next month for the launch of your book. But on a different note, since today we are here, you serving as faculty director at IVenture at ISB, an incubator. So let me just introduce our audience to the IVenture. It's a startup incubator platform aimed at promoting entrepreneurial spirit and actively supporting budding ventures. So, Professor, please tell us more about your association with iVentures at ISB and what really inspired you to really contribute towards such or curating such a program at ISB.
Yeah. So ISB was involved in entrepreneurship before I and my director Soumya Kumar took over. So I don't want to claim we started it, right? It was there, but it was fragmented. There were little projects here, little projects here. And the dean essentially told us that I want to think about entrepreneurship in one whole. In other words, we want to create something which develops the entire ecosystem, because entrepreneurship seems sexy, but it is hard as hell. Okay, it's a long journey, it's a relay race, it's a long haul. So you can't do it alone. Rajasthan, where I grew up, they say, Akela chana bhaan nahi phod sakta, right? So we need a lot of people together. Funders need to come together, ideas need to come together, co-founders with different skills need to come together, and then we need to teach people how to go to the customer before you own your project. So feedback from customer, very, very important, the lean startup thing. So we wanted to create a place where we support the entire ecosystem. That was what drove us. And it's a journey, we are on our way, we are not quite there yet, but I would like ISB and IVenture at ISB to reach a place so that anybody who thinks about entrepreneurship and says, where should I go for content? Where should I go for ideas? They think of us first. We will not do it alone. We will partner. We'll partner with other institutes, technological and science institute, like we just signed MOU with BITS Filani. We work with Triple IT, which is right next door. So we are working with others to curate this entire experience. That's what our goal is. Our goal is to really take that entrepreneurial spirit and help it thrive, because we know it's risky and because we know failure rate is high. We need to be able to provide all the help we can.
So, it would be great if you could give us some excerpts of the programs, or a bit of a flavor of the programs that you do at iVenture at ISB, so that and what has been the progress so far, so that our audience can also learn more about the programs, and if they see any conversions, they can also explore the same.
Right. So I would direct people to i-venture.org. This is our website. Everything is there. So we run several programs. We take programs for people who have a very early stage idea. We call that iSprout. So you have an idea, but it's just an idea. So we help you come together, form a team, take this, and perhaps create something like a prototype out of it. Then we also take startups that already have an idea, but then we help them create a minimum viable product out of it. Then we have some other people who are at a fairly high stage, and they need help with the go-to-market strategy. So we have several acceleration programs. So as I said, we cater to all different levels of entrepreneurship. Then we have some specialized programs for women entrepreneurs. So we have run a few cohorts for a program called IVen, which is one of the co-founders has to be a woman. So we want to encourage women entrepreneurship. We've run several of those. We are industry agnostic. I think of entrepreneurship as, are you solving a problem? Period. That's my definition. Because if you're solving a problem, somebody benefits from it, and those who benefit from it will be willing to pay for it. To me, that's the end of entrepreneurship. But idea is not enough. It's all about execution. It's all about making sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. So that's what we like to do here. So our main strength is our alumni. We have about 13,000 plus, I think close to 14,000 alumni. So when a startup comes in, we connect them with one of our alums who might be an expert in a particular field. They are not entrepreneurs necessarily, but they can mentor them. So it's the people and the talent that's really important. People say, oh no, funding is important. I said, no, funding follows good ideas and good execution. You got a good idea, good mentors, good team, funders will come in. So we also reaching out to many funders, many outside funders, some government funding, but even private funders who are interested in looking at our startups.
That's great. I think ideas are the new crude oil of the day. So you are absolutely right there. But talking about now, Professor, about you, and when asked about why you left UCLA, you often mention that global economy is even gravitating towards east, and with India as its epicenter. So why shouldn't I? So I mean, that's how I think your association with ISB started. I think around 4 or 5 years ago, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so having this association with ISB and India in the larger sense, where do you see India faring in the centenary year? I'm not asking for today, but I'm asking for you to 2047. Where do you see India at 2047? And what would be your message since you came back to India? What would be your message if you were pitching or you were making a case for reconnecting to one's root?
Okay. So I will say India is a maddening country. It's maddening because there are so many things that we should have done by now, but we have not. So that frustrates me. But at the same time, I see the opportunity. The opportunity is so big that it is criminal not to do something about it. And that's what brought me here. So you're right. I like to show people on a world map. I draw a little circle around India and Asia, and I say, this little circle has more than 50% of the world population. So our focus should not be what India US trade is going to look like, what China US trade is going to look like. We should be focused more on what India China trade is going to look like. Okay, it's unfortunate that our politics hasn't reached there where we can start think of this as one region. But can you imagine? Can you imagine if India and China put their human resources together? And that's what I tell all my scholars. The guys, we need to understand the political economy here. We need to see how to make things work in this region because that's where the potential is and that's where the beneficiaries are. We need to pay attention to this part of the world. That's why I'm here and I'm trying to convey this to many of my colleagues by holding conferences, by holding, inviting scholars to come and visit and say, pay attention here.
That's such an absolute thought. I think by centennial, suppose we'll have more people coming in back to India and giving back to their roots. Well, that's all we have time for today. I want to thank our guest, Professor Bhagwan Chowdhry, for joining and sharing his insights on his model of impact investing, Fab, which is absolutely fabulous. I would insist again. And Professor Chaudhary, thank you so much for this intriguing talk. And it's a pleasure to have you on the show. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me an opportunity.
I hope our listeners enjoyed this conversation and learned something new. If you want to learn more about Professor Chaudhry or IVenture at ISB program, you can visit their website at is-venture.org or follow them on their social media handles. And don't forget to tune in for the next episode of Impact Talks, where we bring you inspiring stories of people and organizations that are making difference in the world. Until then, this is Adarsh signing off. Have a great day. Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Adarsh.
Thank you.